Your CFO fired you in front of the entire department, expecting tears, begging, maybe even a lawsuit, but you stayed silent. You only needed one click, and 2 weeks later, his $150 million empire began crumbling layer by layer, minute by minute, email by email. This isn't a story about litigation or revenge served cold. This is about a silent execution performed with surgical precision, using nothing but the very compliance laws he thought were just expensive paperwork. My name is Ava Sinclair, and for 7 years, I was the only federally certified compliance officer at Vanguardist Biotech in Ravenport. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other coffee at 6:30, emails by 7, first meeting at 8. What I didn't know was that by noon, I'd be walking out of that building for the last time, carrying a cardboard box and a plan that would destroy the man who thought he could erase me like a line item on a budget spreadsheet. Travis Huxley had been CFO for 18 months, Harvard MBA, Wharton Executive Program, the kind of resume that looked impressive until you realized he'd never actually built anything. He only knew how to cut. He walked into the all-hands department meeting at 11:45 that morning, wearing his signature navy Armani suit and that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Before we begin today's quarterly review," he announced, scanning the room like a predator surveying prey, "I need to address some organizational changes." I remember the exact moment everything shifted. He turned to me, that smile widening just enough to reveal what I now recognize as sadistic pleasure. "Ava, as part of our efficiency optimization initiative, we're eliminating redundant positions. Your role as compliance officer is being absorbed into our legal department. Your services are no longer required, effective immediately." The room went silent. 23 faces turned toward me, waiting for the explosion, the tears, the predictable script of corporate humiliation, but I gave them nothing. I closed my laptop with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silence, gathered my notepad, and stood up. "I see," I said, my voice steady as granite. "I assume you've already filed the federal succession paperwork?" Travis's smile flickered, just for a microsecond, but I caught it. "That's an administrative detail we'll handle." Administrative detail. Those 2 words told me everything I needed to know. This man, who controlled $150 million in federal contracts, thought compliance was just paperwork. He thought I was overhead, a costly checkbox on some regulatory form that could be penciled in by anyone with a law degree. "Of course," I replied, allowing myself the smallest smile. "I'm sure you have it all figured out." I walked out of that conference room with my spine straight and my head high. Behind me, I heard Travis continue his presentation about profit margins and cost reductions. He was already erasing me from the narrative, confident that by tomorrow, no one would even remember the middle-aged woman who used to insist on reading every contract, who stayed until 10 at night double-checking federal compliance codes, who stood between Vanguardist and regulatory disaster for 7 years. Security escorted me to my office standard protocol. They assured me, nothing personal. I had 15 minutes to pack. As I placed my framed certifications into the cardboard box, I thought about the email I'd sent to myself 2 weeks earlier, when Travis first started excluding me from audit preparation meetings. The email contained every federal contract number, every compliance deadline, every regulatory requirement that had my name attached to it. More importantly, it contained the passwords to the Federal Compliance Registry passwords that Travis didn't even know existed. The security guard, Marcus, whom I'd shared coffee with every morning for 5 years, looked uncomfortable as he watched me pack. "This isn't right, Miss Sinclair," he whispered. "No," I agreed, logging out of my computer for the last time. "But it will be." As I walked through the lobby, that cardboard box in my arms like a prop in some corporate theater, I saw my reflection in the polished marble walls. 42 years old, 15 years of compliance experience, and reduced to nothing by a man who thought leadership meant subtraction. But Travis had made a fatal error, one that would only become apparent when it was far too late. He thought compliance was about following rules. He didn't understand that in the federal contracting world, compliance officers aren't just paper pushers. We're the key holders. the ones who keep the government's door open. And when you eliminate the only person with the keys, that door doesn't just close. It locks. Standing in the parking garage next to my car, I pulled out my phone and opened the Federal Compliance Registry app. My credentials were still active. They wouldn't expire for another 30 days. More than enough time. I typed in the notification, anticipated separation from Vanguardist Biotech, effective date pending. One click, that's all it took. The system would process it within 72 hours, triggering a cascade of automated reviews and holds that Travis couldn't even imagine. By the time he realized what was happening, the entire federal audit apparatus would be descending on Vanguardists like antibodies attacking an infection. I placed the box in my trunk and sat in my car for a moment, looking up at the gleaming tower where I'd spent 7 years protecting a company that discarded me like outdated software. Travis was probably still in that conference room, basking in the approval of executives who thought he was a genius for cutting overhead. Let him enjoy it. His victory would last exactly as long as it took for the first federal notice to arrive. The notification I'd submitted to the Federal Compliance Registry was just the opening move. Sitting in my home office that evening, I mapped out what would happen next with the precision of a chess grandmaster who could see 20 moves ahead. 2 weeks earlier, when Travis started excluding me from the audit preparation meetings, I knew something was coming. The federal audit, a $150 million contract review scheduled for April, was the kind of event that should have had me working 16-hour days. Instead, I was being systematically frozen out. Travis would schedule meetings at times he knew I had mandated compliance calls, then claim I was choosing not to prioritize the audit prep. But Travis's ignorance about federal compliance would be his undoing. He genuinely believed that compliance was just about checking boxes and filing forms. He didn't understand that my name, Ava Sinclair, Federal Compliance Officer Certificate Number 447829, was literally embedded in the contract infrastructure. Every federal agreement Vanguardist had signed in the last 5 years contained a clause requiring a designated, certified compliance officer, not a department, not a team, a specific person with federal credentials. That night, I pulled up the Federal Compliance Registry on my laptop. My Level 3 access was still active. A detail HR wouldn't think to revoke because they didn't even know it existed. Travis had no idea that beyond the basic corporate compliance role, I held federal certifications that took 3 years to obtain and required annual security clearances. You couldn't just hire someone off the street to replace me. The waiting list for certification alone was 8 months. I navigated to the anticipated separation filing I'd submitted from my car. The system had already generated an automatic case number, AS 2024-03-15847. In the notes field, I added a simple observation. Position eliminated without succession planning. No replacement identified. Federal audit scheduled for April 2024. I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I simply stated facts that the automated system would flag as critical compliance failures. The beauty of federal bureaucracy is its predictability. I knew exactly how this would unfold. Within 72 hours, the Federal Research Audit Office would receive an automated alert about a continuity breach at a major contractor. They wouldn't call Vanguardist immediately. That wasn't how the system worked. Instead, they'd open a preliminary review file, generating internal paperwork that would sit quietly for about a week before someone noticed the size of the contracts involved. But I wasn't relying solely on automation. The next morning, I exercised another privilege Travis didn't know I had my position on the Regional Compliance Advisory Board. It was a voluntary role, unpaid, the kind of thing executives like Travis saw as a waste of time. What he didn't understand was that this board included compliance officers from every major federal contractor in the region. We met monthly, shared best practices, and most importantly, we talked. At 9:30 that Wednesday morning, I joined our regular virtual meeting. 7 familiar faces appeared on my screen, including Beth Morrison from Grayford Therapeutics and James Park from Sentinel Defense Systems. "Va?" Beth exclaimed. "We missed you at last week's audit prep symposium. Everything okay at Vanguardis? Actually, I said, keeping my tone professionally neutral, I should mention that I'm no longer with Vanguardis. My position was eliminated yesterday. The silence was immediate and telling. Every person on that call knew what my departure meant for Vanguardis's federal standing. They eliminated the compliance officer position, James asked, his voice incredulous. 3 weeks before a federal audit. Travis Huxley felt it was redundant. I replied simply. I didn't need to say anything else. These were professionals who understood the implications immediately. By the end of that day, 7 different compliance officers would be having casual conversations with their executives about Vanguardis's interesting strategic decision. The corporate whisper network would do more damage than any lawsuit I could file. But the real mastery was in what I did next. I logged into the federal contract database using my still active credentials and pulled up every contract where I was listed as the designated compliance officer. There were 47 active contracts totaling over $93 million. Each one required a formal succession notice within 30 days of a compliance officer change, or the contract would automatically enter review status. Travis probably thought he had 30 days to figure this out. What he didn't know was that I'd already started the clock 2 weeks ago when I filed the first anticipated separation notice. The system was designed to prevent exactly what Travis was trying to do: eliminate a crucial position without proper succession planning. I composed one final action in the system, a request for succession verification on all 47 contracts. This wasn't malicious. It was actually required protocol that I should have done before leaving the building. But by doing it now, after my termination, it would create a temporal paradox in the system. The database would show a compliance officer requesting verification of their own replacement after their position had been eliminated. The federal system hates paradoxes. It would flag this for immediate human review. I closed my laptop and made myself a cup of tea. Outside my window, the city went about its business, oblivious to the small digital bombs I'd just planted in Vanguardis's foundation. Travis was probably in his office right now, reviewing his cost-cutting projections, imagining the praise he'd receive for eliminating my 6-figure salary from the budget. The irony was beautiful in its simplicity. He'd fired me to save maybe $200,000 a year, but by Monday, when the first federal notices arrived, he'd realize he'd just jeopardized $93 million in contracts. And the best part, everything I'd done was completely legal, completely within protocol, and completely irreversible. Thursday morning, 9:15 a.m., the first domino fell. I was having coffee on my patio when my phone buzzed with a text from Sandra Williams, a former colleague still at Vanguardis. FRA just sent a notice. Legal is freaking out. What did you do? I didn't respond. Sandra was fishing. Probably asked by HR to reach out, but I knew exactly what had happened. The Federal Research Audit Office had received the automated alert about the continuity breach and moved faster than I'd anticipated. They'd sent what we in the compliance world call a yellow letter. Not quite a warning, not quite a threat, but a formal request for clarification. By noon, my phone was lighting up with calls from Vanguardis numbers. I let them all go to voicemail. The 5th call was from Margaret Ross, the head of HR. Her message was professionally panicked. Ava, we need to discuss your transition urgently. There seems to be some confusion with the federal systems. Please call back immediately. Confusion. That was one way to put it. What was actually happening inside Vanguardis at that moment was far more chaotic than Margaret's calm voicemail suggested. I knew because Beth Morrison from Grayford called me at 2:30 that afternoon. Ava, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but it's too delicious not to share, she said, barely containing her amusement. My assistant's roommate works in Vanguardis's legal department. Apparently, they've had 3 emergency meetings since this morning. Travis Huxley tried to tell them to just hire a consultant to handle the federal audit, and their general counsel almost had a stroke. I allowed myself a small laugh. Federal law doesn't permit consultants to serve as designated compliance officers for active contracts, which Travis would know if he'd ever actually read the compliance requirements. Beth replied, By the way, I've been authorized to make you an informal offer. Grayford would love to discuss a senior compliance position. Very senior. I appreciate that. Beth, let me think about it. After we hung up, I pulled up my laptop and logged into LinkedIn. Already, 3 recruiters had messaged me. Word travels fast in the compliance community, especially when someone with federal certifications becomes unexpectedly available. But the real fireworks started Friday morning at 7:45. I was reviewing job offers when an unknown number called. The area code was familiar. Washington, D.C. Miss Sinclair. This is Deputy Director Michael Harrison from the Federal Research Audit Office. I'm calling to verify your current employment status with Vanguardis Biotech. Good morning, Deputy Director Harrison. I was terminated from Vanguardis on Tuesday, March 15th. There was a pause. I see. And were you aware that you're listed as the designated compliance officer on 47 active federal contracts? Yes, sir. I submitted the required notifications to the Federal Compliance Registry before my access was terminated. Miss Sinclair, I need to be very clear about something. Did Vanguardis identify a certified replacement before terminating your position? Not to my knowledge, sir. Another pause, longer this time. Thank you. Miss Sinclair, one more question. Would you be available to serve as an independent consultant to help resolve this situation? This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The FRA wasn't just concerned. They were concerned enough to consider bringing me in as an external advisor. That meant they were contemplating serious action. I appreciate the offer, Deputy Director, but I believe that might create a conflict of interest, given the circumstances of my departure. I understand. Thank you for your time, Miss Sinclair. Within an hour of that call, Vanguardis' CEO, Richard Blackstone, tried to call me personally. I recognized his direct line. He left no voicemail. By 3 that afternoon, the situation inside Vanguardis had escalated from panic to crisis. Sandra texted me again. Travis just got pulled into a closed door with the CEO, and the entire board is dialing in. Legal department is working through lunch. What the hell is happening? What was happening was that the FRA had just sent their second letter. This one wasn't yellow, it was orange, one step below red. They were demanding immediate confirmation of a qualified compliance officer, or they would initiate a full audit freeze. In federal contracting terms, this was like having a gun pointed at your head with the safety off. The beautiful irony was that Travis had created an unsolvable problem. Even if they wanted to hire someone immediately, federal certification took months. Even if they could find someone already certified, that person would need security clearance specific to Vanguardis' contracts. Even if they found someone with the right clearances, they'd need to be briefed on 47 different contracts, each with its own requirements and deadlines. Travis had eliminated the one person who could have managed this transition smoothly: me. That evening, I opened a bottle of wine and sat on my patio, watching the sunset. My phone had 37 missed calls from various Vanguardis numbers. The executive team was probably in hour 10 of crisis meetings, trying to figure out how to explain to their investors that they'd just put $93 million in jeopardy to save my salary. But the federal government wasn't done. The compliance system I'd triggered was like an avalanche. Once it started, it gathered its own momentum. Every hour that passed without a designated compliance officer was another violation. Another flag in the system, another reason for the FRA to dig deeper. And Monday was still 2 days away. By then, the orange letter would turn red, and a full audit freeze would be automatic. No human decision required, just the cold, implacable logic of federal bureaucracy executing exactly as designed. Travis had thought he was cutting fat from the budget. Instead, he'd cut an artery. And Vanguardis was bleeding out in real time while he watched helplessly, finally understanding that some positions aren't overhead. They're load-bearing walls. And he'd just knocked one down with a sledgehammer. Monday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The emergency board meeting had been going for 4 hours. I knew this because Margaret Ross from HR had broken protocol and called me from her personal cell at lunch. Ava, I'm not supposed to be calling you, but this is insane. The entire board flew in. They've got 3 law firms on conference calls. Travis has been presenting solutions for 2 hours, and every single one has been shot down. I'm sorry to hear that, Margaret. Are you? Her tone was sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like you knew exactly what would happen. I followed required federal protocols. Margaret, that's what I was hired to do. She sighed. The CEO wants to know if you'd come back. Same position, 20% raise. My position was eliminated. Travis said it was redundant. Ava, please. We're looking at a complete federal freeze in less than 48 hours. I let the silence stretch before responding. Margaret, even if I wanted to return, I can't help you now. Once a compliance officer is terminated and the succession verification fails, there's a mandatory 30-day cooling period before they can be reinstated. Federal Regulation 447.15b. The gasp on the other end told me this was news to her. It would be news to everyone in that boardroom, too. At 3:45, I got a text from someone I hadn't heard from in years. David Marsh, a board member who'd always supported my compliance initiatives. His message was simple. Travis just got eviscerated. CEO asked him point blank if he understood federal compliance law before eliminating your position. He couldn't answer. The meeting, I learned later from multiple sources, was a masterclass in corporate blame shifting. The general counsel, Patricia Steinberg, presented a timeline showing she'd never been consulted about my termination. The head of federal contracts revealed he'd sent 3 emails to Travis warning about the upcoming audit. Even the CFO's own deputy, Jennifer Wu, distanced herself, producing documentation showing she'd recommended against the elimination. Travis was alone on his sinking ship. But the real death blow came when Richard Blackstone, the CEO, asked the question that should have been asked 2 weeks ago. Travis, explain to this board how eliminating a $200,000 position was worth risking $93 million in federal contracts. Travis's response, according to my sources, was to pull up a PowerPoint about operational efficiency and redundancy elimination. He got 3 slides in before board member Catherine Faulkner, former Secretary of Commerce, stopped him. Mr. Huxley, I don't think you understand. We're not asking for management consultant buzzwords. We're asking if you comprehended that Ms. Sinclair's federal certifications were legally required for our contracts. The legal department can handle compliance. Travis responded. The room apparently went silent for a full 10 seconds before Patricia Steinberg spoke. No, Travis, we cannot. Federal compliance officers require specific certifications that take 3 years to obtain. No one in legal has them. No one in this company has them except Ava Sinclair. At 4:30, my phone rang. It was Richard Blackstone himself. Ava, I'm going to be direct. We need you. The company needs you. I'm prepared to offer you a 30% raise, a formal apology, and Travis Huxley's resignation. Richard, I appreciate the call, but as I explained to Margaret, federal regulations prevent me from returning for 30 days after termination. There has to be something we can do. You could have not fired me 3 weeks before a federal audit. The silence on his end was heavy. Finally, he spoke. Travis made this decision unilaterally. I want you to know that. Richard, Travis couldn't unilaterally order coffee. Someone signed off on this. Someone in HR processed it. Someone in legal should have flagged it. The entire system failed, not just Travis. What do you want, Ava? It was the question I'd been waiting for. Not because I planned to negotiate, but because I wanted them to understand the position they'd put themselves in. Richard, this isn't about what I want. The Federal Research Audit Office has initiated an automatic review process. Even if I could come back tomorrow, the damage is done. You've been flagged as a high-risk contractor. That classification takes 18 months to clear, minimum. 18 months. If you're lucky, if the April audit goes badly without a compliance officer, it could be permanent. Another long silence. Travis is finished here. You know that, right? That's your business, Richard. Would you consider consulting help us transition? I've been advised by counsel that any involvement with vanguardists during the federal review could be seen as attempting to circumvent regulations. It was a lie. I hadn't spoken to any lawyer, but Richard didn't need to know that. At 5:15, Travis Huxley was escorted from the building. Jennifer Wu sent me a discreet message. Security just walked him out, box and everything, poetic justice. I didn't reply, but I thought about my own walk of shame just 6 days earlier. The difference was, I left with my reputation intact and my future wide open. Travis left with his career in ruins and his name about to become a cautionary tale in every business school case study about compliance failures. That evening, the financial press picked up the story. Vanguardist Biotech faces federal contract freeze after compliance crisis, ran in the Wall Street Journal digital edition. Travis Huxley was named specifically as the executive responsible for the strategic miscalculation. By the end of the day, Vanguardist's stock had dropped 12% in after-hours trading. The board announced an emergency restructuring of the executive team, and somewhere in his undoubtedly expensive apartment, Travis Huxley was learning what I'd known all along. In the federal contracting world, compliance officers aren't overhead. We're the ones keeping the lights on. Tuesday morning. My phone rang at 8 sharp. Beth Morrison from Grayford Therapeutics. Ava, I'm calling with a formal offer. Senior Vice President of Federal Compliance. Your salary requirement plus 40%, full benefits, and a signing bonus that should make you forget Travis Huxley ever existed. That's generous, Beth. It's strategic. Every federal contractor in the region just watched Vanguardist implode because they didn't value their compliance officer. My CEO wants to make a statement that Grayford does things differently. I was reviewing Beth's written offer when another call came through. Sentinel Defense Systems, then Meridian Pharmaceuticals. By noon, I had 6 formal offers, each more lucrative than the last. My termination from Vanguardist had transformed me from an invisible bureaucrat into the most sought-after compliance expert on the East Coast. The irony wasn't lost on me. Travis had called me overhead in front of 23 people. Now, companies were fighting to pay me 40% above what Vanguardist had. Wednesday brought an unexpected development. The Federal Research Audit Office called again. But this time, it wasn't Deputy Director Harrison. It was his boss, Director Sarah Martinez. Miss Sinclair, I'll be direct. We're initiating a full systematic review of Vanguardist Biotech, not just the April audit everything, 5 years of contracts, compliance records, and financial documents. We need someone who understands their systems. I'm sure Vanguardist will cooperate fully. Director Martinez. That's not what I'm asking. The FRA wants to hire you as a special advisory consultant. It's a temporary position, 6 months, but the compensation is substantial. She named a figure that made even Grayford's generous offer look modest. You want me to audit my former employer? We want you to ensure federal interests are protected. Your insight into their compliance infrastructure is invaluable. Plus, frankly, your situation has raised red flags about how other contractors might be treating their compliance officers. It was perfect. Not only would I be making more money than Travis ever dreamed of cutting from the budget, but I'd be the one overseeing the investigation into Vanguardist's compliance failures. Every document would pass through my hands. Every violation would be cataloged by me. I'll need 24 hours to consider. Director Martinez. Of course, but Ava, this offer won't wait long. We're moving fast on this. That afternoon, something delicious happened. Travis Huxley updated his LinkedIn profile, seeking new opportunities in financial leadership and operational excellence. Within hours, screenshots were circulating in private compliance groups with laughing emojis and comments like, maybe he should optimize his resume first. But the real power shift became clear Thursday morning when Richard Blackstone called again. Ava, I heard the FRA approached you about a consulting position. News traveled fast in the federal contracting world. I couldn't comment on that, Richard. If you take it, you'll be investigating us. If I take it, I'll be ensuring federal compliance standards are maintained. He sighed. We've hired Thompson Advisory to manage our compliance transition. They're bringing in a team of 5 people to do what you did alone. 5 people at Thompson rates that must be costing a fortune. $700,000 for 6 months, minimum. I did the math quickly. They were now paying 3.5 times my annual salary to replace me for just 6 months. And that didn't include the cost of the frozen contracts, the legal fees, or the stock price collapse. Richard, can I ask you something? When Travis presented the idea of eliminating my position, what was the projected annual savings? $190,000. And what's this crisis costing Vanguardist so far? A long pause. Between the emergency consultants, legal fees, frozen contracts, and market value loss. Conservative estimate is $18 million and climbing. $18 million. Travis had cost the company $18 million to save $190,000. Did anyone challenge Travis's decision, I asked. Jennifer Wu raised concerns. She was overruled. By whom? By me. Richard admitted. I trusted Travis's judgment. He said you were redundant, that compliance was just expensive paperwork. I didn't question it. There it was. The CEO himself had signed off on my termination without understanding what I actually did. The entire executive team had nodded along while Travis dismantled a critical safeguard because none of them bothered to understand federal compliance. Friday morning, I accepted the FRA position. 6 months as a special advisory consultant, investigating federal compliance failures at major contractors, starting with Vanguardist Biotech. The salary was more than I'd made in 2 years at Vanguardist, and it came with something even more valuable: authority. I would have full access to Vanguardist's records, emails, and internal communications, every decision Travis had made, every corner he'd cut, every time he'd dismissed compliance as overhead. It would all be under my microscope. That afternoon, the FRA issued a press release announcing my appointment. They included my full credentials, my experience, and pointedly noted that I was formerly the sole certified compliance officer at Vanguardist Biotech until the position was eliminated in March 2024. My phone exploded with messages, former colleagues congratulating me, journalists wanting interviews, other compliance officers sharing their own stories of being undervalued and dismissed. But the best message came from Jennifer Wu Ava. You need to know that when the press release hit, Richard had to leave the building. The board is furious. They're discussing replacing the entire executive team. Travis's name is toxic. 3 other companies have already announced they won't hire him. You didn't just win, you changed everything. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Travis Huxley was discovering that his Harvard MBA and Wharton credentials meant nothing when weighed against a catastrophic failure of judgment. He'd probably never work in federal contracting again. As for me, I'd gone from being eliminated overhead to the most powerful compliance officer on the East Coast in exactly 10 days. Travis had been right about one thing. I wasn't an asset to Vanguardist. I was the foundation, and without me, the whole house came crashing down. Thursday morning, 7:38 a.m., 3 federal agents in dark suits entered Vanguardist Biotech's headquarters at 3100 Pioneer Boulevard, Ravenport. They didn't need to announce themselves. The security desk had been notified the night before. The elevators were held specifically for their arrival. They rode straight to the 31st floor, where the executive offices overlooked the city like a glass throne room. I wasn't there, of course, but Sandra Williams was. And she texted me in real time. They're here, 3 of them, walking straight to the CEO's office. Everyone's frozen at their desks. The agents weren't there for a courtesy visit. They carried with them official notice of an on-site review, the nuclear option in federal contracting. This wasn't just an audit anymore. This was an investigation. I was in my new temporary office at the Federal Research Audit Office, reviewing Vanguardist's contracts when Director Martinez walked in. Your former CEO just called the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, she said, sitting down across from me. He's trying to get the on-site review canceled. And The deputy secretary reminded him that federal compliance isn't negotiable. Then she asked him why his company eliminated their only certified compliance officer 3 weeks before a major audit. I pulled up the preliminary report I'd been preparing. Director, I found 17 contracts with immediate compliance failures. All of them were supposed to be reviewed by a certified officer monthly. They haven't been reviewed since my termination. Martinez looked at the screen, her expression hardening. 17, that's not just negligence. That's systematic failure. At Vanguardis, the federal agents were setting up in Conference Room A, the same room where Travis had fired me. They requested immediate access to all compliance records, all emails related to federal contracts, and all communications regarding my termination. Patricia Steinberg from legal tried to negotiate, asking for time to review documents for privilege. The lead agent, Special Investigator Robert Kane, responded with 5 words that chilled the entire floor. This isn't a request, counselor. By 10 a.m., the agents had commandeered an entire section of the 31st floor. They brought in their own IT specialists, who began imaging servers and copying drives. Every executive's email account was frozen and duplicated. 5 years of corporate communications suddenly became federal evidence. Richard Blackstone stood in his office, watching his empire being dissected by federal authorities, and placed another call to me. This time, I answered. Ava, please, tell me how to fix this. Richard, I'm now a federal consultant. I can't advise you. This is destroying us. Our stock is down 30%. 3 major investors have pulled out. The board is meeting tonight to discuss bankruptcy options. Bankruptcy. It's only been 2 weeks since you fired me. 2 weeks that destroyed 5 years of growth. Ava, Travis didn't just eliminate your position. He apparently told the board you were incompetent, that you were slowing down operations with unnecessary reviews. I felt my jaw clench. He said I was incompetent. He presented a whole analysis about how much money we could save by streamlining compliance. The board bought it because the numbers looked good. The numbers always look good when you ignore federal law. Richard. Meanwhile, the investigation was uncovering exactly how deep the rot went. Special Investigator Kane found emails where Travis explicitly instructed department heads to bypass compliance reviews to expedite processes. He'd created a culture where federal requirements were seen as suggestions rather than obligations. At 2:45 that afternoon, something extraordinary happened. Kane's team found what they called a smoking gun, an email chain from 6 weeks earlier where I had warned Travis, in writing, that eliminating compliance reviews could trigger federal sanctions. Travis had replied, and I quote from the document that would later become public record. Ava's paranoia about federal requirements is exactly why we need fresh perspectives on efficiency. Paranoia. He'd called my professional diligence paranoia. Sandra texted me again at 3:15. They just sealed Travis's old office, yellow tape and everything. Security is telling everyone to stay at their desks. The on-site review was supposed to last 3 days. By the end of day 1, the agents had found enough violations to justify a full criminal investigation. The Department of Justice would be getting involved. This wasn't just about contracts anymore. This was about potential fraud. That evening, as federal agents continued their work into the night at Vanguardis, I sat in a conference room with Director Martinez and 3 other senior FRA officials. Martinez said, "What we're seeing here is unprecedented. A major contractor essentially dismantled their entire compliance infrastructure to save money. How did no one stop this?" "They believe Travis," I replied simply. He had an MBA from Harvard, talked about optimization and efficiency, showed them spreadsheets that promised millions in savings. No one wanted to be the person who stood in the way of progress. Except you. And look where that got me. Deputy Director Harrison leaned forward. "Your documentation is impeccable. Ava, every warning you sent, every compliance report you filed, it's all here. You created a perfect record of your attempts to protect federal interests." I had, though not intentionally. I'd simply done my job the way I always had, thoroughly, completely, and with extensive documentation. It was Travis who had created the perfect record of his own downfall by dismissing every warning in writing. At 7 that evening, Vanguardis's board convened an emergency meeting. According to Jennifer Wu, who was still feeding me information, it lasted exactly 45 minutes. 3 resolutions were passed unanimously. Richard Blackstone was removed as CEO. The entire Executive Compensation Committee was dissolved, and the company would fully cooperate with all federal investigations. The new interim CEO's first act was to send a formal request to the FRA, asking if I could be temporarily released from my federal consulting position to help Vanguardis navigate the crisis. Director Martinez showed me the request, smiling. "Want to know what we're going to charge them for your services?" She showed me the number. It was more than Travis's annual salary. "They'll pay it," I said. "Oh, I know they will. They don't have a choice." As I left the federal building that night, I thought about Travis's smug smile when he'd called me overhead. I wondered if he was watching the news, seeing his former company's headquarters surrounded by federal vehicles, his name mentioned in every report as the architect of the disaster. The FBI would later calculate that Travis's optimization initiative had exposed Vanguardis to over $300 million in potential federal penalties, all to save my $190,000 salary. But numbers don't capture the full picture. They don't show the 150 employees who lost their jobs when Vanguardis downsized to pay legal fees. They don't show the researchers whose life-saving projects were canceled when funding dried up. They don't show Travis Huxley, alone in his apartment, Googling career change after corporate scandal. The federal agents would spend 3 more days at Vanguardis, cataloging what happens when you treat compliance as overhead instead of infrastructure. And I would spend the next 6 months getting paid government rates to explain to everyone exactly how Travis Huxley had destroyed a 15-year-old company in less than 2 weeks. Friday evening, 6:47 p.m. My personal cell phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in 3 weeks. Richard Blackstone, calling from his personal phone. The board had removed him as CEO 5 days ago, but desperation has a way of breaking down corporate protocol. "Ava, I know you can't advise me officially, but I need you to know something. We're dying here. The new interim CEO is trying, but without someone who understands our specific contracts, we're just bleeding out faster." I set down my wine glass, looking out at the Ravenport skyline from my apartment. "Richard, you made your choice. You all did. Travis convinced us you were expendable. He had charts, graphs, consultant reports showing how other companies operated without dedicated compliance officers. Other companies aren't managing 47 federal research contracts worth $93 million. I know that now." His voice cracked slightly. "Ava, we need you. The company needs you. I'm not CEO anymore, but I still have influence with the board. They'll pay anything. They'll give you anything. Richard, even if I wanted to help, I'm now a federal investigator examining Vanguardis. There's no walking that back." There was a long pause. Then he said something that explained everything. "Travis showed us a presentation 3 months ago. He said compliance officers were like insurance. You pay for them hoping you'll never need them. He said we were overinsured." "And you believed him?" The board believed the Harvard MBA with the Goldman Sachs background over the middle-aged woman who'd been quietly doing her job for 7 years. Yes. There it was. The brutal truth. They hadn't seen me as a professional with 15 years of specialized expertise. They'd seen overhead that could be optimized away by someone with a fancier pedigree. "Richard, do you know what Travis is doing now?" "No one will hire him. His name is toxic in the industry. Last I heard, he was trying to rebrand himself as an independent consultant." I almost laughed. Travis Huxley, who destroyed a company by eliminating its compliance infrastructure, was now trying to sell himself as a consultant. The irony was perfect. Saturday morning brought another development. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature story. The $190,000 decision that cost hundreds of millions. They'd gotten hold of internal documents, including the email where Travis called my federal compliance concerns paranoia. The article included a photograph of Travis from his LinkedIn profile, all confident smiles and expensive suits, next to a simple fact: Huxley's decision to eliminate the compliance officer position has resulted in estimated losses of $340 million and counting. My phone buzzed with a text from Beth Morrison at Grayford. That article is being passed around every boardroom in the country. You've become the most expensive firing in corporate history. Also, our offer still stands when your federal contract ends. But the real call I'd been waiting for came at 2:15 that afternoon. It was William Travers, the new interim CEO of Vanguardis. Miss Sinclair, I'm calling to make a formal request. We need someone to help us navigate the federal investigation. Someone who understands our contracts, our obligations, our systems. Mr. Travers, I'm currently employed by the FRA to investigate Vanguardis. I understand that, but Director Martinez has indicated that you could potentially serve in a dual capacity continuing your investigation while also helping us remediate. It would be unprecedented, but so is our situation. And what makes you think I'd want to help the company that threw me away? Because I've read your files, Miss Sinclair. 7 years of perfect compliance records. You didn't just do your job, you protected this company. Even now, your documentation is the only thing preventing criminal charges against the board. You cared about Vanguardis, even when Vanguardis didn't care about you. He was right, and I hated that he was right. I had cared. I'd spent countless nights reviewing contracts, verifying compliance, protecting a company that ultimately saw me as expendable. What are you offering? $1 million for 6 months of remediation work, full authority over all compliance decisions, direct report to the board, not through any executive filter, and something else, a formal, public apology from Vanguardis, acknowledging that your termination was a catastrophic error in judgment. A public apology. That was unexpected. I'll need to discuss this with Director Martinez. Of course, but Ava, we're desperate. The federal freeze is costing us $2 million a day. Our researchers can't access funding. Our contracts are in limbo. We have 48 hours before we start missing federal deadlines that will trigger automatic terminations. After I hung up, I called Director Martinez. They want me to play both sides. I said, I know. Travers called me first. Ava, this is your decision. But I'll tell you what I told him. If you help them while investigating them, everything has to be transparent, every communication documented, every decision reviewed. You'd essentially be saving the company while simultaneously documenting its failures. A corporate executioner and surgeon at the same time. Exactly. The question is whether you want that responsibility. I thought about Travis's smiling face when he'd fired me. I thought about the 23 colleagues who'd watched in silence. I thought about Richard Blackstone, who'd chosen to believe PowerPoint slides over 7 years of proven expertise. But I also thought about the researchers whose projects were frozen, the employees who hadn't made these decisions but were suffering the consequences, the life-saving work that Vanguardis did when it wasn't being run by idiots who thought compliance was optional. I'll do it, I said, but my conditions are non-negotiable. Which are? The $1 million is just the start. I want Travis Huxley's name on every document explaining the failure. I want the board to issue a statement acknowledging that compliance is not overhead, but critical infrastructure. And I want my old office, Travis's office, with his nameplate still on the desk as a reminder. Martinez laughed. You want to work at his actual desk? I want everyone who walks into that office to remember what happens when you treat essential people as expendable. Monday morning, I walked back into Vanguardis Biotech, this time with a federal badge and a 7-figure contract. The security guard, Marcus, smiled sadly as he handed me my new access card. Welcome back, Miss Sinclair, though I guess you never really left. He was right. My presence had haunted every meeting. Every failed attempt to fix what Travis had broken. Every $1 million lost. I'd been gone for 3 weeks, but my absence had cost them everything. As I settled into Travis's former office, my new office, I opened my laptop and began typing my first report as Special Remediation Consultant. Subject: Systematic Failure Analysis, Root Cause, The elimination of essential infrastructure misidentified as overhead by CFO Travis Huxley. Somewhere in the city, Travis was probably reading the news of my return, understanding finally that I hadn't destroyed him. He'd destroyed himself. I just made sure everyone watched. 6 months later, September 15th, 3:20 p.m., I stood in the boardroom of Vanguardist Biotech for the last time, presenting my final report to the board of directors and representatives from the Federal Research Audit Office. In conclusion, I said, clicking to my last slide, Vanguardist has lost $387 million in market value, paid $43 million in federal penalties, and spent $16 million on emergency consultants and legal fees. Total cost of eliminating one compliance officer to save $190,000, $446 million. The room was silent. The new CEO, William Travers, nodded slowly. And our current status? Fully compliant. All 47 federal contracts have been restored. The FRA has lifted the high-risk designation. You've hired a team of 3 certified compliance officers, established an independent compliance board, and created protocols ensuring this can never happen again. Director Martinez stood up. The federal investigation is officially closed. Miss, Sinclair's work has been exemplary. As the meeting concluded, Richard Blackstone approached me. He'd aged years in 6 months, his hair now more gray than black. Ava, I need you to know something. Travis tried to sue the company for wrongful termination last month. I almost laughed. How did that go? The judge threw it out in minutes. Apparently, destroying a company through gross incompetence isn't grounds for a lawsuit. He's now living in Chicago, working as an assistant manager at his brother-in-law's logistics company. From CFO of a biotech giant to assistant manager in logistics, Travis had optimized himself right out of the industry. What about you, Richard? I'm retiring. The board gave me a graceful exit, but we all know what this is. I failed in my primary duty, protecting the company from catastrophic decisions. I trusted the wrong person and ignored the right one. As I packed up my laptop, Jennifer Wu stopped by. She was now Deputy Chief Compliance Officer, one of my recommendations. Ava, you could stay. The board would approve any salary you named. No, I said, looking around Travis's old office one last time. My work here is done. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of champagne, watching the sunset over Ravenport. My phone buzzed with a message from Beth Morrison. Grayford offer stands. Actually, we've increased it. Name your start date. I'd already accepted a different position, Director of Compliance Strategy at the Federal Research Audit Office, a permanent role, overseeing compliance standards for all federal contractors. The salary was less than Grayford's offer, but the power was infinitely greater. I would write the regulations that companies like Vanguardist would have to follow. My phone rang, an unknown number with a Chicago area code. I knew who it was before I answered. Hello, Travis. There was a pause. Ava, I wanted to apologize. No, you don't. You want absolution. I destroyed everything. My career, the company, people's lives. You destroyed yourself the moment you confused price with value. You thought because my salary could be eliminated, my function could too. I was wrong. Yes, you were, but not in the way you think. You weren't wrong about the math. Travis, you were wrong about the fundamental premise. You thought leadership meant cutting costs. You thought optimization meant elimination. You thought overhead meant unnecessary. What should I have thought? That some things that look like overhead are actually foundations, and when you remove foundations, everything collapses. Is there any way back for me? I thought about lying, giving him some false hope, but that wasn't my style. No, Travis, your name is permanently associated with one of the worst corporate failures in federal contracting history. Business schools are already teaching your case as an example of what not to do. You're not a person anymore. You're a cautionary tale. He hung up without another word. As night fell over Ravenport, I thought about the journey from that Tuesday morning when Travis had smiled while destroying my career. He'd thought he was cutting fat, optimizing processes, being the kind of decisive leader that boards love. Instead, he'd taught corporate America a $400 million lesson: never mistake the quiet competence of a compliance officer for overhead. We're not the ones slowing you down. We're the ones keeping you alive. I closed my laptop and smiled. Tomorrow, I'd start my new role at the FRA, making sure no other compliance officer would ever be dismissed as casually as I had been. Travis had tried to erase me from one company's story. Instead, he'd written me into the regulations that would govern them all. The execution was complete, not with rage or revenge, but with the cold precision of federal law properly applied. Travis had pulled the trigger when he fired me. I just made sure the gun was pointed in the right direction. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate justice. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of compliance revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed someone underestimate a crucial team member only to face the consequences? Let me know your stories in the comments.